Good morning. Hello and welcome to Common Sense. Here's our weekly short video for you to share with your family and your friends. All of you that know me, I'm not a tech person. I get my tongue tangled all the time. I'm dyslexic. And so I write everything down so that I don't mess up the message. This is not really my message. It's concise from many people that I listen to every single day and have been doing for now over a year. So today we have some serious issues to talk about again. And so always pretty serious, isn't it? In March of 2020, we first heard about this COVID-19. And at first, it seemed so far away from us when the president banned foreigners from flying into the States. So quite frankly, most of us paid little attention to it. It seemed far away. Then we started hearing more and more about this and seeing a medical task force being formed and on TV every day, sometimes with our president, sometimes not. But they were telling us how serious it was. Now, at first, they were telling us things like, it's a flu season anyhow, and you should be washing your hands frequently, not touching your face, all those types of things. And frankly, I didn't realize how often I touched my face until this whole thing started. So next was the face mask issue, and we were told we would be quarantined for a few weeks. When that quarantine was extended, my curiosity got the best of me, and I began searching and researching online to see what I could find out. Now, we were scared to death, to be honest, in the beginning, and we ordered necessities like food and toilet paper, everyone else, online, and we picked them up at our local store. You didn't even have to get out of your vehicle. We isolated ourselves from everyone and everything, checking periodically with loved ones to make sure they were okay. My first video I watched was of a doctor who was showing us how to clean food before bringing it into our homes. As an example, he said it would be best to take everything out of its wrapper and place it in another container. He used a loaf of bread as an example and stated if you wanted to keep it in its original wrapper, then pretend that it was covered with glitter and you're using your disinfectant wipe to get every single piece of glitter off from it. Well, he was a doctor, so I played the video twice to be sure I hadn't missed anything. And we set up a table outside our home, disinfected it. We had a trash bin next to the table. I would open crackers or cereal with my gloved hands and place them on the table, throwing away the boxes or containers immediately in the trash bin. Every single item was disinfected or removed from its packaging before coming into our home. Canned goods were disinfected and then left out there for 3 days. I don't know why I get dusted, but that's what they said to do, so I did it. I'm a good little trooper. I can follow directions, usually. My second video that I watched was with Dr. Judy Vitz. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. It's Mikovits. She is a virologist with a PhD in biochemistry. And she worked with Dr. Fossey when she was only 22 years old. I think she's in her late 50s, early 60s now. It was apparent she did not respect nor like Dr. Fossey, as she had several stories. The only scientist she trusted was a Francis W. Rossetti, Ruscetti. I believe he's passed now, but I did look him up and read about him. Dr. Judy has several books out, and her story was very disturbing to me. She claims they have targeted the elderly, meanwhile, disabled, military, our healthcare workers as part of their depopulation effort. Tests are 97% false positive And the media is the largest part of the problem with their disinformation, or in most cases, no information at all, except to scare the hell out of all of us. She has seen firsthand that Dr. Fauci and Gates developed diseases like HIV and the vaccine for them. This was years ago. Human individuals mean absolutely nothing to them. So I ordered her books. One is called The Case Against Mask, and the other one is called Plague of Corruption. And I suggest you use Barnes and Noble. Okay, all that information was very alarming, especially after I read those two books. So now I'm going down yet another rabbit hole. But now I've got my eyes wide open, and I'm wondering, what the hell's going on here? I'm listening intently and searching for what the hell is going on. I beg your pardon, that's my bird in the background. Sometimes she gets really loud. If she thinks I'm ignoring her, I guess. So anyhow, I decide, I make myself a note. I need to study pandemic, PCP tests, COVID-19, masks, and vaccines. This is before the vaccines even came out, I started this. So I watched literally hundreds, and that is no exaggeration, hundreds, hours and hours of videos and podcasts, and I visited numerous sites. I researched on the CDC and WHO's websites. I watched doctors who testified before Congress and the Senate from May through June, and obviously they were ignored. So now I started investigating, what are they talking about, these treatments for COVID that Washington, D.C. is ignoring? So the first thing I learned was that hydrochloroquine, if I'm not saying it right, I think they refer to it now as HYQ, something like that, had been approved by the FDA for over 60 years ago, and it was used for malaria and lupus. Ding, 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 a little bell went off. The first thing I did was call my daughter-in-law, who has lupus, and ask her if she had ever heard of this drug, to which she immediately replied, yes, I've been on it for 6 years. Okay, now I think that it's not some type of witchcraft, but is it effective on COVID? Several doctors stated they had treated hundreds of patients with this drug, as well as ivermectin, ivermectin, in asthmatic inhalers. Oh, there's lots of conspiracy theories out there, and you got to sift through all of it. Pretty hard to believe stories like the swabs had damaged people's brains, or that they were using Chinese laboratories to collect Americans' DNA. One site even made the statement they also collected DNA from animals and planets. Okay, why would they do that? Maybe they did, I don't know. But in my heart of heart, my intuition, what information could they learn from our DNA? And why would they want to do that? There's so much information available, and it's difficult to sort out facts from fiction. So I decided to do two things at once. I started monitoring the COVID cases from two websites, the CDC and the Florida Healthcare, because I live in Florida. I wrote down stats every single day. I filled up 2 full legal pads. But neither site reported number of hospitalizations. It was all about the cases and the deaths. The second thing was to find out just what determines a pandemic. It is described as an epidemic of an infectious disease that has spread across a large region, usually multiple continents or worldwide. Here's the kicker, and causes an increased number of deaths. So why was that called a pandemic in the very beginning? I guess because it was in multiple countries. More I read and listen, the more questions I have. Okay, so I'm seeing with my own eyes that deaths are going up every day. It would seem that we were in the middle of a pandemic, or are we? One of my friends died in March of cancer at home. She had never been tested nor treated, and yet upon her death certificate stated she died of COVID complications. I found this very alarming, so I started asking others. I have friends and or contacts in over 40 states, and I used to have over 400 friends and relatives on social media. I've since gone off from that. I heard the same story over and over, and that either a relative, a friend, or a neighbor had the same story. Perhaps this is yet another reason why we're all being monitored and blocked from social. Don't want us talking to each other. We might learn the truth. My first validation was learning that all deaths were being reported as COVID-19. And why? It's usually money behind the whys, folks. First of all, the hospitals receive government money for any patient they put on a ventilator. All COVID cases reported to the government, whether the patient was dead or alive, received money for every COVID diagnosed case. Secondly, some doctors and nurses reported they had to lie about the death according to hospital policy. In late January, as soon as stats came out for the 2019 season, I compared the numbers from the U.S. Census Bureau and the National Center for Health Services, plus the CDC for the previous 3 years. You know what all three places said? There was no more deaths in 2020 than there was in 2019, 2018, and in some cases 2017. As a matter of fact, there was probably less because nobody died of a heart attack, nobody died of suicide, nobody died of anything but COVID. So we'll never know the truth. It's impossible. We are never going to know the truth. There's no way. This is my second validation. COVID is very real. I'm not saying that. It should have just never been called a pandemic. My third validation came from chat rooms. While playing games against people from all over the world. I play backgammon and canasta and pinochle, and it's my relaxation. Anyhow, you're in chat rooms and you talk to people, and they have plenty to say. And I learned in the beginning there was many countries who didn't even have one case of this, and some were countries that the news was saying differently. I was just blown away by that. So in my mind, I was convinced that COVID-19 should not have been called a pandemic. Who calls that? Well, it turns out that would be the organization WHO. And upon reading every single item on their website, I learned that their main contributor was Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. By the way, in early March of 2020, the CDC came out with a statement that 1,600% of deaths reported due to COVID were not really COVID deaths. You can go on the CDC site and look for yourself, but let me tell you, it takes some digging. It takes a lot of patience. But I've spent hours on their site and on the WHO site, and wow. So now we move on to the actual PCP tests themselves. Again, every testing center set up, somebody made money at it. I met people who told me that through work, they had to be tested several times. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out there is room for air there. That's a validation to me. Then I read in the local news online, because that's the way I get my news, that nearby Lee County in Florida, where they were running the data on tests in this area, all of a sudden they had a spike of 98% positive results when their average had been around 12%. What does that tell you? They were contaminated test kits out there. There also was contaminated masks, but we'll get into that. So, okay, how many other states and counties might have had the same problem? That's a red flag for me, validation too. OAN News had an article regarding too many false positives, which I found interesting because I had read another article that the actual person who invented this test made that exact same statement. Too many false positives. He was killed 2 months after making that statement. Validation 3 for me. So now I'm moving on to wear or not to wear. That is the question. So I notice when I go out, it's about 50-50 among humans of people that wear masks. Now in Florida all summer, we hardly saw anyone wear a mask. I'd say from June till about maybe September, and then more and more. There's more people wearing masks now than there was in the beginning. I kid you not. That's just my observation everywhere I go. I had already learned Dr. Judy's opinion, which we'll call validation number 1 on the mask, because I read her book and everything, and she said it was common sense. Now I decided to go to the Mayo Clinic site. I trust the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Women's Clinic, University of Michigan, Beaumont out of Texas. I've got 5 medical sites that I go to on a fairly regular basis when I want to research stuff, especially what side effects are in medicine that someone called a doctor decided I should take. I'm going to read all the side effects and find out about the medicine before I get the prescription. And then I'm going to research and talk to healthcare officials and see if there's anything else I can do. But that's just me. So when I go to the Mayo Clinic, this is verbatim. Germs live everywhere and sometimes cause an infection. Germs. Bacteria are one-celled organisms that can only be seen with a microscope, and actually some helpful ones live within our bodies. Common bacterial infections would be like strep throat, tuberculosis, urinary tract infections. Viruses are much smaller than cells. Does that mean they can go right through these cloth masks? And they contain generic material. Virus diseases include AIDS. Remember the HIV information I gave you earlier? Dr. Fossey. Virus diseases include AIDS, common colds, Ebola, genital herpes, influenza, measles, chickenpox, and shingles. Antibiotics generally are used very effectively. Unquote. So when does a virus become a disease? Infection occurs when it enters your body and multiplies. Back into quotes. Infection occurs when it enters your body and multiplies. This only happens in a small portion of infected people. Normally, the elderly, or autoimmune compromised humans. My daughter-in-law with lupus, many people I know. Now, this bears repeating, and you should go out and check these things out for yourself. I'm just relaying information. Don't take everything I say as the gospel truth. I'm telling you where to go to search for yourself, because you're not going to get any truth on that boob tube. And it's horrible. Wow. So if viruses are much smaller than cells, it makes sense to me that it cannot go through cloths that the people are wearing on their faces. Maybe the medical ones that they make us put on when we go visit the dentist or our doctors or hospital or something, but certainly not these little cloth ones. I even know a girl, just to make them happy, she wears an all lace so that she can get air. You know, oxygen. Our bodies were made to breathe oxygen, not our own carbon monoxide. So everything I've read, it sounds like only healthy people healthy people have very little to worry about. So that's validation number 2. Another study I read stated masks are actually warm filters, inviting mold and bacteria into your lungs. It's supposed to be oxygen in our lungs. And yet another study I read, it stated they found in a 220-day period, virus cases increased by people who wore masks. Wearing masks actually made people sick. I believe it was something, for longer than 2 hours a day. Longer than 2 hours a day can actually cause bacterial pneumonia, hypoxia, Hypoxia, I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, and quite possibly lung cancer due to the buildup of expired carbon dioxide over extended periods of time. Personally, I find it hard to believe the cancer part of it, but who says you got to believe everything you read? You got to trust your intuition. But all these studies made sense to me, so I call this validation number 3. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we learned that Bill Gates and George Soros funded the Wuhan laboratories in China through one of their charity foundations. They have many, you know. These are all tax-free charitable foundations that they can run money through and not pay taxes on, like you and I have to pay taxes. Legally, according to the IRS, if you got a pig and I got a cow and we exchange it, you got to put a value on the pig, I got to put a value on that cow, and we got to declare it on our taxes, and we got to give the government money on us. I was raised out in the country, and people bartered all the time. Excuse me. Anyhow, a photo even appeared. I don't know if it was real or not, but the article was linking Fauci and Gates to the Wuhan lab, not only monetarily, money-wise, but physically. So here we are led by Fauci, the news, and even our healthcare facilities to wear masks, which will allow a virus to go through them and still allow a sufficient amount of fresh air into our lungs? I don't think so. So remember when you were dating and maybe you did or didn't do this, but we all did this when we were a kid. You wanted to know if you had bad breath, just in case that guy was going to kiss you. So you always took your hands over your mouth and blew out as hard as you could, and then you breathed it in. Now do the same thing. You got a mask on. First of all, I can't hardly hear me talk. I sound like I got a tongue ring or I'm in an echo chamber. And when I breathe, I'm not, what am I getting? I got to suck hard. I'm feeling lightheaded already. How long do I have to hold my hands with gets absolutely just a little bit of air there in the middle before I friggin' pass out? Come on, people. This is crazy. Even my bird thinks so. Her name's Doc. Doc, quiet. Scientists at the Sloan Kettering and many other institutes and tons of places, they say that the Monera mRNA vaccine inactivates tumor suppressing protein, meaning it can promote cancer. Gates and Fauci knew that these vaccines would mess with our RNA. Now, I'm not going to talk about RNA. You need to read these things for yourself, especially if you're considering getting a vaccine. Even if you've gotten it, you need to, what can you do now? I watch many nurses telling their stories of being shorthanded after people on their staff received the second vaccine. They were out for illness. A Dr. Bode Schiffman, Schiffman from Germany, was crying on a video, begging to stop this madness. He said it's killing our children. COVID-19 is the flu, period. And he said effing flu. He's a doctor. He just, doctors are real doctors. Real doctors. are very upset. The World's Doctors Alliance released a statement that the normal flu season is December through April, and there are several treatments for the flu. The head spokesman was from Ireland. She said loudly, no mask, no lockdowns, no social distancing. Stop this madness now. On another side note, the FBI has had Hunter Biden's laptop since November of 2019. And one of the things that was on there was information about this COVID-19 plan. November of 2019. Or was that 18? I believe it was 18. I think I typed that up wrong. Anyhow, you get the idea. The thing on there was when to release it. At first, it was stop the economic success, and the powers that be decided, oh, wait, we can kill two birds with one stone to get rid of Trump once and for all. And so it became center stage of 2020 elections, as well as an economic death, especially of small business owners all across America and the world. Now, if you're smart, or you're curious, or a critical thinker, I hope you're sitting there thinking right now, why did they go to this extreme to get rid of Trump? Well, that is a long story, and we're going to cover that the next video. Why? One headline I read stated that 12 mysterious deaths had occurred. 2 doctors in California, a Boston doctor, and several scientists, all persons who spoke up against this plan. It seemed that people who tell the truth are threatened to lose their license, which I've seen a few doctors that said they read the letters that they got from their local community health boards or whatever it was, threatening them if they treated their patients with anything. They don't want patients treated. They want them to go to the hospital, want them, whatever. Merrick scrapped the C-19 vaccines, stating the reason they scrapped them is because it's more effective to get the virus and recover than to take a vaccine. Good for you, Merrick. Good for you for telling the truth. I expect to see you to go down the tube soon. They'll do something to get rid of you, because we can't have truth seekers out there. France tried to enforce mandated vaccinations, and so many people refused it, they had to postpone their little vaccine event. Australia banned the vaccine due to so many testing positive for HIV. Germany, Italy, India, and France all suspended the vaccines. You still think America is considered the leader in the world, especially when it comes to health? Nope. The FDA staff recommended watching for Bell's palsy in Moderna and Pfizer vaccine recipients. Go to the FDA website. This usually shows up within 32 days of being vaccinated. Dr. F. Deklerk, D-E-K-L-E-R-K, from the Netherlands, said COVID-19 is a cover-up. And it's really about the New World Order, and if doctors speak up, they either lose their license or are arrested in the Netherlands. Dr. Vladimir, Zelenko, he's the one, he was the president, Trump's doctor. He stated on a video that early treatment is the key, masks are plain ridiculous, and millions of people were slaughtered due to the lies of Fossey and the news. Crimes against humanity, treason, they all should be hung. I got a nice big tree out here, line them up. He considers them all worse than criminals. He also stated that the AMA is a prostitute that sold its soul to its political puppet masters instead of taking care of the American people. You can see his recommendations on Twitter under his name, Dr. Zelenko. Dr. Simone Gold, who is also an attorney as well as an MD, stated these were experimental vaccines and can cause death in our elderly, C-19 has a 99.9% survival rate. They are really pushing this vaccine, and the companies who make it are protected from liability. However, people will be able to sue their employers who force them to receive it. This is according to Dr. Simone Gold, Gold. She also has an early treatment plan on her website, which is stopmedicaldiscrimination.org. Stopmedicaldiscrimination.org. Dr. Richard Ursel states that we've had treatment since the very beginning. United States doctors are concerned because normally when people have an adverse reaction to a flu vaccine, they have medical remedies to help them. But there are none for this particular vaccine. That's pretty scary, and it's very concerning to the medical field. Attorney Glasswire, Glaswer, I'm sure I slaughtered that one. He filed a famous federal court case against Big Pharma. 8,000 people were in a study comparing those vaccinated against those not. People not vaccinated were healthier, and 67% of the healthy people, they had chronic underlying diseases, and they still didn't get it. He added vaccines are experimental and contain neurotoxins. Cliff High reports that the media is underreporting adverse reactions of the vaccine, but soon they'll be so high they can't ignore it. Isn't that interesting? First, they keep reporting how high the deaths are from a COVID death when we don't even know what percentage of those deaths were not COVID deaths. Now we got deaths occurring from the vaccine, and they're not reporting the deaths at all. Fear and control. You need to be asking yourself why. There's something bigger going on here than just the COVID. On camera, Bill Gates stated he could make 20-to-1 return on vaccines, and that's how he became the richest man in the world. At the time he became the richest man in the world. I understand he's trying to delete those videos, but I saw it with my own eyes. Hopefully you can too if you're so inclined. In 6 months, there are as many doctors, nurses, biochemists, and experts I listened to. Many. One very disturbing video was Dr. Corey, who addressed the Senate and Congress twice to voice his concerns over this vaccination. I listened to the entire thing. He was listen to this carefully. And Congress and the Senate ignored it. Are these people that are looking out for us? No, they're lining their pockets. Big pharma money. He was speaking for a group of highly published physicians of the world with nearly 2,000 publications. In May of 2020, he spoke to Congress about how critical anti-inflammatory steroids are. Mounds of data during the past 3 months suggest ivermectin, ivermectin, as a treatment drug. That's like the third time we've heard the name of that drug. If you take it, you will not get sick, period. The rate of deaths have been higher in Blacks, Latinos, and the elderly. This should not be political, but it has been used with intensive, willful deception. Thank you, Dr. Corey, even though our senators and congressmen ignored you. My research proved to me that the only value in these vaccines is to line the pockets of Soros, Gates, Fauci, the AMA, pharmacists, and Big Pharma. At first, it was 1 vaccine needed. Now it's 2. And there are even rumors that we might need 3. And we might need them every year. We might need a booster every 5 years. Do people who are vaccinated still need to wear masks? What are the potential side effects? Also keep in mind that Dr. Fauci is the highest paid employer of the federal government. Plus, he's not been a practicing physician in how long? At least 40 years that I'm aware of. And yet, on another side note, the Big Pharma executive hired by President Donald J. Trump to lower the price of drugs committed suicide. Did he now? Did he now? Boy, they think we're stupid. Claire Edwards sent a report to the United Nations called the COVID-19 Genocide of 2020. There's a good read. And yet another tidbit is that Mel Kay, a research journalist I highly respect, said she found a patent on the COVID-19 vaccine by a Rothschild in 2016. Isn't it? I did research patents, and I found one by Gates much earlier than that, but I did not write that down, so I can't quote it, unfortunately. Sorry, but I remember it was out there, and you can search patents for yourself. Isn't it interesting that certain religious communities did not get COVID? And when the people ask why, they found out it's because they don't own TVs. Now, Dr. Charlie Ward made that statement. It was funny, but you know what? It is true. How much BS are you going to believe before you turn that damn news off? The bottom line is, for me, COVID-19 was not a pandemic. PC testing was non-conclusive. Non-medical masks are absolutely useless and can be harmful. And vaccines are downright dangerous. There are preventions and treatments. For me personally, I have an age disadvantage plus some health issues, so I dug deep to learn what I could do as prevention or protection from this horrible, horrible virus. I spoke with a few doctors and friends that I trust, and for me, it was to increase my vitamin D intake, my vitamin C intake, and zinc. And I will continue doing that until around May 1st. And then I do take those things, but not in mega amounts. And then I take them if I feel like my throat's scratchy or something. Knock on wood. I've not had a cold nor the flu in years. My autoimmune system, my blood work says it's weak. I don't know. I'm blessed. But so that's what I do. And I'm also blessed to live in Florida, so I do get quite a bit of sunshine, although I do not lay out in the sun. Never had, not my thing. But I do get some sunshine when I'm working in the garden or what have you. I'm weak in the exercise and dieting areas, so I try to get at least 10 minutes of exercise daily. And since my diet weakness is pasta and breads, I, rather than deny myself from the pleasures of food, because when you get to be my age, especially, food is a really big pleasure. But anyhow, so I developed my own plan. It's a 75-25. If I'm a good week, it's 80-20, where that means 80% of the time I do no breads, no pastas, no desserts, and I try to avoid all processed foods and carbs. And most of my dinners is maybe 6 to 8 ounces of meat, and it's usually chicken or lean meat, grass-fed, and lots of veggies. I try to have like an orange and a green or a white and a green, or about the only veggie I don't particularly care for is lima beans. So I have a lot of choices out there. Now, I got to show you something here. My healthcare company sent this to me free. Can you see that? Free. And when you open it up, okay, there's what it says. It says, this kit contains what you need for the winter illness season. Keep it in a safe place. Call if you have flu or COVID-19 symptoms. And there's a little kit. A thermometer, things that say, do not open until directed. And this one is, if you have flu symptoms, call this number before you open this. And you tell them. And in it is a little paper. And on the paper, it says, just stay well. Wash your hands and avoid touching your face. Clean and disinfect household surfaces. Stay away from people who are sick. Strengthen your immune system by getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, staying active, and getting a seasonal flu shot. Take your temperature regularly, especially if you have flu symptoms like sweats, chills, body aches, or cough, to get well if you feel sick. Stay home and rest. Drink plenty of clear fluids. water, broth, tea, or juice. Juice is full of sugar, you normally avoid that. Consider using over-the-counter medicines such as Tylenol. Seek immediate care if your symptoms become severe. So if you're sick for 3 days, go get help. On the other side, here's what you do right now. They tell you how to store it. They want you, to measure your temperature for 3 days before you, one of those, I think the first one you open is an at-home swab. And here's what you do. You take your temperature for 3 days in a row, log it down, then you call this number, and you get a conference call from this particular insurance company, and a healthcare professional will be at the other end telling you what to do step by step. Isn't that special? So, now should I get the COVID, I know that if my primary care doctor will not provide me with the 2 drugs that I've mentioned, then I will contact Synergy Health SYNERGYHealthPC.com, who offer telehealth solutions and call-in prescriptions for you. Fast treatment is the key to wellness. I understand there's another one out there now too, but I know this one for sure. I've been out there and looked all over their website. On March 17th, which was exactly a year since the shutdown in Florida at any rate, Ann Vandersteel had a physician on her show. His conference was videotaped and shared with her audience. I literally watched hundreds of similar stories. Here's a brief outline of what he shared. This was just a few days ago. It is absolutely insane to wear masks outside. Our vitamin D levels are critical to strong immune systems. Obesity reduces your vitamin D consumption. 70 to 80% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D, especially if you are Black, Latino, or elderly. Finland, Norway, and Sweden test for vitamin D deficiencies in their people. Magnesium and zinc are important to add to our diets. Just having enough of vitamin D, magnesium, and zinc will stop 90% of hospitalizations. We all need 20 to 30 minutes per day of sunshine. The further north you live, the darker your skin, the more you need vitamin supplements. Cut out sugar, processed foods, and carbohydrates. Early treatment is critical. There is a treatment for disease. The FDA cannot approve a vaccine. HQC is a good treatment, but IVERMECTIN is better. 4 billion people took it. It's super safe. Houston, Texas used it heavily and found it decreased their death rate by 95%. It costs 2 cents in other countries. Here in America, of course, $2 to $5. Argentina has had a 100% recovery rate from COVID-19. Now, what makes me angry is that the news media could be reporting valuable information to us like this instead of their fear-mongering, ignorant. Americans should be outraged. This week, Ann Vandersteel and Dr. Stella Emanuel, she had Dr. Stella Emanuel as a guest. She lives in South Africa. She's a doctor in South Africa. She's part of the frontline health team there. She stated it's been treatments for COVID strains for years. There's many strains of COVID. That's why people are affected differently as well. America needs to wake up because something is very evil going on, and it's to destroy humanity. The American drug companies are pushing a vaccine, which is a generic changing drug. If they get away with what they have done, then every time they want to push a political agenda, they'll just release a new strain. Keep your immunity system up. Also this week, Erin Marie, OLSZEWSKI, and prior service in the military, told her story. She's a nurse in Florida, volunteered to go to New York City to help with the COVID crisis. What the mayor was doing, unbelievable to her. He refused to isolate COVID patients, especially the elderly. You've heard a few of those stories. They're starting to come out in main media now because I guess he served their purpose. He killed many of the elderly for the deep state. So now let's get rid of him and move on to somebody else. But if you remember, President Trump sent the ship there, Mercy, and he also sent extra people, and people like Aaron volunteered their time to go there and help. Well, because she knows military persons, I'm going to sneak this in here. Someone contacted her from the military, extremely upset, said that they are all being required now to watch a 2-hour video regarding the January 6th incident, which they have blocked out all the BLM and Antifa and CNN cameras being set up in there prior to this happening. And all the Trump supporters, plus the president, wasn't even in the vicinity. They were down at the other end of the field because speakers were still scheduled after the president spoke. But anyhow, they have to sit through a 2-hour video, and they're blaming Trump supporters and considering all Trump supporters terrorists now. And after that video, they're required to sign a new oath, and if they don't, they can be court-martialed as a domestic terrorist. She stated Hitler did the same thing. Now, here you go. When you hear stuff like this from me or from anybody else, anyone that you know in the military that has a son or daughter in the military, ask them. Ask them if they know anything about this. And early this week, 2 more people from the medical field gave their stories. Some highlights are it's now an uphill losing battle against the COVID propaganda. Politicians make lousy doctors. So does the media. Hospitals receive money for every person placed on ventilators. All stuff we know. We know they're not FDA approved. Known successful treatments are available and cheap, and they've been out there for ages. This is all about money and power. It takes 7 to 10 years to vet safety on any vaccine. The ones that are out now are experimental. Companies cannot be held liable. And that should be 2 red flags for free-thinking people. Dr. Zenlenko stated that out of 500,000 people, we could have prevented 400,000 deaths. His website is TheZelenkoprotocol.com. My doctor stated that I should get the vaccine because of my age, that I'm autoimmune compromised, and I smoke. He's from India. And I replied, well, even your motherland country has banned the vaccine. See, I'm not supposed to know that. He must know that. His family all lives there. He said absolutely nothing. Just got up and walked out of the room. I think it's time for me to get a new doctor. Now, I'm not recommending anything to anyone. You should do your own research. I've shared with you plenty of places to start, lots of stories. Between the last video and this one, to research for yourself. Draw your own conclusions. Don't let the media or even your doctor, at least I'm not. We the people means all the people, no matter what your faith, gender, or color is. Respect your fellow Americans. Be kind to your family, friends, and neighbors. And that's your Sunday morning common sense. Can't stop this. There we go.